The chapter that we're dealing with is chapter 7, and it's the time of the end, number 1, the clouds of calamity. The clouds of calamity. And we're going to be picking up here on page 51, where the Great Kahan left off last week. And, of course, this is speaking of the time of the end, and we are in this last 3.5 year time period that's listed, that is known as the end. And we're going to start here on the top of page 51. On the top of page 51. And let's see here. Yep. Okay. So, and we're actually working in Daniel 9:24 is where we are, and of course this is the prophecy of the 70 weeks. And, am I going the right way here? Nope. There we go. Just to kind of bring a reminder, a reminder of what the main subject of the sermon is. And the main subject is that the deception has brought about sin, bringing in the last 3.5 years that will end in the destruction of those who do not follow Yahweh's laws of righteousness. That's a mouthful, but that is the bottom line. Deception has brought about sin. The being evil as the gods, Genesis chapter 3. In Genesis chapter 3, as Pastor has shown us and has told us to reiterate this, to keep it in our minds, about being evil like the gods. And, showing that bringing in the last 3.5 years, that will end in the destruction of those who do not follow Yahweh's laws of righteousness. So once this end takes place, this last great war that's going to kill 4/5 of the earth's population, leaving roughly 2 billion people left. Those that are going to be left are going to be those who are following, and those who are following the laws of Yahweh. So that is the main subject of the sermon. And just remember some of the scriptures to reinforce. Revelation 12:9. Of course, we know that talks about the great deception. The great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. Okay? So that great dragon, she has that great power, as the Great Kahan brought out at in his first class. This great power, this great ability to deceive the whole world. And you think about what she has been able to do and how she has brought that about, causing the entire world to follow after her. It's simply amazing. And then you also see in Revelation 9:14 through 15. Saying to the sixth Malach, which has the trumpet, to loose the 4 angels who are bound in the great river Euphrates. And remember, on Sabbath, we saw that video clip of when that was actually accomplished, of when that was carried out, of when Pastor actually loosed the 4 angels who were bound for the great river Euphrates. And then the 4 angels, they were loosed, which were prepared for an hour and a day and a moon, or a month and a year, in order to slay a third part of man. So I kind of looked. I wanted to kind of get a little bit better of idea of the clouds of calamity. Well, the word cloud, when I looked it up in Webster's, that's what it shows here. It shows usually a visible mass of minute particles suspended in the air, or a gas. And I want you to think about what this sermon is talking about and apply what we've learned since then concerning the microorganisms, and how the microorganisms and the microbes have infiltrated and are overloading the firmament. And this is what we see. How the sins have reached into the heavens. We know these things are airborne. You can just look at the sickness that's being passed around that's in the air now. And then a cloud is also something that has a dark, lowering, or threatening aspect. The cloud. You see the clouds of. We can see that threatening aspect of. You've heard like the term of the clouds of nuclear war, of that threat hanging over mankind. We see that with the doomsday clock, and how that doomsday clock is steadily progressing toward midnight. And of course, we know that midnight is that 0 hour. So then when we look at calamity means a disastrous event marked by a great loss and lasting distress and suffering. So you think about the depth of this sermon here, of what Pastor's showing us, the clouds of calamity, this threat of this disastrous event, which is this great tribulation in which 4/5 of the population is going to be wiped out. And yes, that is a great loss. 4/5 of the earth's population, that's a tremendous loss. And lasting distress and suffering. The world, as we've talked about before, they don't realize that they're suffering now. Yeah, but the world is, they are suffering. They're suffering greatly in the state of their bodies, in the state of their minds, in their physical health, in their mental health, and just in the physical, with the physical and mental threats of war and crime and different things along that line. There is a great distress, which brings us to the second definition there, which is a state of deep distress or misery caused by a major, it says, misfortune or loss. And of course, that major, I don't like that word, misfortune, but you look at what brought all of this about, and it's through this deception. It's through what Isaiah 24, 1-6 describes as the transgression of the law, the changing of the ordinances, and the breaking of the everlasting covenant. It's what Yada did in hiding the name of Yahweh. It's what they did it's what the sons of it's what the sons of Israel did when they did not uphold the teaching of the law of Yahweh. They did not uphold their office. They did not uphold that office, and that is what has brought this about. And you can see the synonyms down there if you take a look again. The first synonym that popped up was apocalypse, cataclysm, catastrophe, debacle, disaster, tragedy, and these are very severe. These are very, very severe definitions. Okay? So kind of keep those, keep those in mind as well. But going back here to page 51 here, where it says 70 weeks are determined, and that word determined, if you take a look at the overhead again, that word determined is Hebrew word number 2852, and it means to be determined, it means to be decreed, it means to be settled, it means to be marked out. So this is the 70 weeks is determined, it's outlined, it's marked out, it's decreed. It's been set in motion. This is the way it is. It has been settled. This is what is going to take place upon the holy city. Now, highlight this next part here where it talks about to finish transgressions. Highlight this. We're going to see it again. To finish transgressions. This is to get rid of sin. This is including the getting rid of sin, to finish transgressions, to show or to make an end of sin, and to make reconciliation for iniquity, for breaking the law. So this is what the 70 weeks are determined. This is what they are decreed. This is what it's going to be done. So make sure you highlight that, to finish the transgressions all the way through where it says for the reconciliation for the iniquity, for breaking the law. And it means to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up the vision of the prophecy. And that is with his laws, which must be sealed in the hearts and the minds. It's the only way that this can be done, to get rid of sin, to finish transgression. By very definition, the definition of sin is the transgression of the law. So to finish that transgression of the law, one has to repent, and one has to turn to keeping the law. There's no other way to bring an end to that. And there's no other way to bring an end to the curses that come from the breaking of that law. And this is what the laws which must be sealed in the hearts and the mind. And if you remember Malachi chapter 4, verse 6, where it talks about that they will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children and the hearts of the children to their fathers. Before I come, before the earth is struck with the curse and utter destruction in the day of Yahweh. So, this is that warning. This is the warning that has gone forth. If you take a look at 2 Timothy 2:19 there, it shows us that nevertheless, the foundation of Yahweh stands sure, having this seal. So this is the seal. This is the seal that Pastor's referring to here. It says, having this seal, that Yahweh knows those who are his, because everyone who reverences the name of Yahweh departs from iniquity. They depart from the practicing of the breaking of the law of Yahweh. No one who enters the kingdom, he shows here, will ever likely be led astray again. To seal up the vision, he continues here back in the book, to seal up the vision and the prophecy, to anoint the holiest of the holy people. And you're talking about what's going to take place with the first resurrection, which we'll get into here in just a little bit. But this makes reference to that first resurrection that's mentioned there in Revelation. And this is which will be the last thing that Yahweh will do, which takes place with Yahshua and Yahweh Shema at the supper that will be held there at that time, just before we are sent back into the world, to clean it up. Okay, and again, remember, that's talking about that first resurrection in Revelation chapter 20, verse 4 through 6. And now back in verse 25 here, back to the book here, it shows, "And know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and rebuild Jerusalem to the Messiah, the Prince, will be 70 weeks. It will be 70 weeks. And this came to pass." Pastor, brought out, he's been bringing out, but the amount of detail that is in Yahweh's prophecies it's amazing at how minute and how detailed that Yahweh gets with these things, and it leaves no doubt, no room for doubt. There should be absolutely no room for doubt whatsoever. And he shows that this came to pass. It is actually 70 weeks of years, and everyone knows this actually took place. This prophecy was fulfilled, he shows. He says, "At 7 weeks and 62 weeks of years, the street will be rebuilt again, and the wall even in troublous times." So that wall, even in troublous times. "And after 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off without a successor, and the people of the Prince." But it will be rebuilt again. It will be rebuilt again, and the wall, even in troublous times. In Micaiah, if you take a look at Micaiah chapter 7, verse 11 there, it gives that prophecy. It shows a prophecy there. It says, "In the day that your walls are to be rebuilt, that day your boundary will be far extended." Now, what I saw with this was this side note here, the side note F. And that side note F shows, how do we know this is speaking of the temple and Jerusalem? Pastor lays it out step by step by step by step there for us. Micaiah 1:1, the prophecy concerning Samaria and Jerusalem. Micaiah 3:9 through 12, Zion being plowed like a field. Micaiah 4:1 through 5. The house of Yahweh is established. Zechariah 8:9. The house of Yahweh is established so the temple can be rebuilt. Okay, so Pastor, he covers all of those there, and he shows that, yes, this is that time period. This is that time period that is being spoken of there. But it shows here, shows here that it will be cut off without a successor, and the people of the Prince. Now highlight this, because we need to know this as well. This Prince, we'll see more on that, because Prince here means a religious leader, and that's what we want to highlight. We want to highlight that. Prince here means a religious leader. The people of the religious leader who will come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. Was that done? Was the city of Jerusalem and the temple, was it ever destroyed? When was it destroyed? Praise Yahweh, 70 AY. Now, if you know your history, that's why I asked it. If you know your history even a little bit, you will know that the Holy Roman Empire came in and destroyed the city and the sanctuary. Highlight that. Highlight that. Now, if you know your history even a little bit, you will know that the Holy Roman Empire came in and destroyed the city and the sanctuary. And there is no doubt about that at all. All you have to do is read a little bit of history and you will see where they accomplished this. They hated the house of Yahweh so much that they fulfilled the other prophecy in Micaiah, which says, Zion will be plowed like a field, in order to keep anyone from knowing that a temple ever sat there. And I don't know if you've ever seen aerial shots of Rome, but of Rome, but this is Rome. Anyway, this is a kind of a satellite view of Rome, and what you can see, right? See the cursor over here. Right here? Anybody know what that is? That's the Vatican. Okay? That's the Vatican. You come across the river, right down over here. Anybody know what that is? Praise Yahweh, that's the Colosseum. So we're going to go to the next slide. So that's kind of that area zoomed in there. Okay, so what you see there, you see the Colosseum, and this is where for entertainment purposes that the believers were tortured, they were killed, they were murdered, they were put on entertainment for the masses. And what you see outside of the Colosseum here, this here is the Arch of Constantine. Okay, it's not the Arch of Titus, but it's the Arch of Constantine. But if you follow this road here, down here, this was, if you remember the article that was brought up that talked about the Arch of Titus, it's been in the many publications. You heard about the Via Sacra, which is, and this was the road that was lined with the temples and had the gods on either side. Well, that's what this is right here. And at the end, right here, you see that little structure right there? That's the Arch of Titus. And remember what the significance is with the Arch of Titus. And this is a picture of that arch, of the Arch of Titus. And if you remember the relief that is actually in the side of the Arch of Titus here, we've seen that many times. And this is, remember, this shows the triumphal return from taking the spoils from Jerusalem and bringing them back to Rome. And here you see this procession, and here you can see very clearly the 7-lamp lampstand. You can see that very clearly right there. Over here, a little less clear, you can see the trumpets. And looks like just behind the trumpets back over here, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that's the table of showbread, if I remember correctly. So that is the Arch of Titus. That is kind of that overview of where all of that is, and just how in close proximity that it actually was to the Vatican. I mean, it's amazing how close it was. And then, of course, this here is the modern-day Temple Mount. This is the modern-day Temple Mount. And what we're looking at is, I believe this is the northern side of the Temple Mount, because in the prophecy it shows that there was a public building that was built to the south. And so this right here, this area over here, this is that public building that was set to the south. And the east gate, I think that this is the east gate if I remember right? Okay, so you got the east gate. And remember, one of the things they said about the east gate, that the east gate was actually lined up with the Holy of Holies. It actually lined up with everything. And right back here in the very, very back is, and you really can't see it too well there, but that is the dome of the tablets. And that's where it is said that it is believed that the Holy of Holies stood. And that's called the Dome of the Tablets, and that was actually in the an issue of the Biblical Archaeological Review, which the archaeological finds and what it's showing there actually shows, and this is the work that has been done by Pastor and the House of Yahweh, actually shows that the temple actually sat in this area, not here, but up here. And look how flat that is. I mean, you can't even tell that there was ever a temple that was built there, can you? Another prophecy fulfilled, and you can see the fruits of it. You see the proof of it right there. Okay? So, I mean, just kind of continuing on here. Let me see here where I am here. And of course, that was in Micaiah chapter 3, verse 12, that showed that Zion would be plowed like a field and that Jerusalem would become heaps of rubble. And I kind of got ahead of myself there just a little bit, but that's what we're seeing right there with that temple there, or with the Temple Mount. So, continuing on back to the book here, it says, he gave a precise number here, and it was filled up to that point of years. And all the commentators know this because they have the history and the prophecies in front of them, and there are no doubts about that one at all. And its end will be as a flood, then unto the end of. The words end of here were put in the wrong place. The word of is not in the Hebrew. So they placed it where they thought it should be. or where they thought it should have been. And it should not go after the word. It should not go after the word end. It should be the word after. The end after the wars, desolation, or the end of the wars of desolation. And Pastor shows here, he says in modern English and translated properly, the end that he is speaking of here is the wars of desolation. And if you would take that word of out of where it is and put it in after the word war, you would see a totally different reading. Unto the end, which is the wars of desolation are determined. Okay, and so you can see how severe those wars are going to be. Here again is the judgment of the kingdom. It was determined by the judgment of the kingdom of Yahweh that they would allow certain wars to take place to bring an end to sin. This will actually bring an end to it. Now notice, highlight this next part here. Highlight this next part. It will not be the end of the people left alive. Okay, notice that. It will not be the end of the people left alive. These people will start doing what is written in Zechariah 14, which is the keeping of the feast, what the house of Yahweh is doing today. It's showing what the house of Yahweh is doing today. And in Zechariah chapter 14, verse 16 through 18, if you want to put that kind of as a cross-reference there, but it shows there, and then it will come to pass that everyone who survives of all the nations which came against Jerusalem will also go up from year to year to worship the King of Yahweh of hosts by keeping the feast at the house of Yahweh. And it will be that if any of the families of the earth will not come up to Jerusalem and worship the King, Yahweh of hosts, then upon them will be no rain. The blessings aren't going to be there. Right? Because the keeping of the law brings the blessings. This is what Pastor brought out this past Sabbath. In Deuteronomy chapter 28, verses 1 through 14, show the blessings that come. And then in verse 18, then if the family of Egypt will not come up and present themselves, they also will have no water. They will receive the same plague which Yahweh of hosts strikes the heathen with, which will not come up to keep the feasts at the house of Yahweh. No, Yahweh, remember, Yahweh doesn't send, he doesn't strike the people down, but these are the consequences that come from not keeping the laws of Yahweh. Okay? So if you will notice here, if we go back to the book here, and it shows here, it says, if you will notice here, back up to verse 25, this 62 weeks and the 7 weeks make up 69 weeks. That is all you have fulfilled there, 69 weeks. If you look back to verse 24, you will see that 70 weeks are determined. These are 70 weeks of years. We have 69 weeks of years right now fulfilled. They have already taken place. We have a week left, and that week is what Daniel spoke of in another place that we will speak of in just a minute. Notice here it says, until the wars of desolation that are going to take place. Verse 26, until this destruction is determined, takes place. Now, if you take a look at this word here, this word determined is actually Hebrew word number 2782, which means to point sharply. That is literally to wound. Figuratively, to be alert or to decide. And it's a different word than it was used in verse 24. If you remember, that other word meant to be determined, meant to be decreed, meant to be settled, meant to be set. And this one here, that destruction that is determined, it actually means to wound. It means to wound. So that it's talking about this destruction that is going to wound. It's going to cause hurt, pain, and sorrow takes place. Now, with that in mind, this destruction that is determined, well, what is determined? What destruction? Daniel 12 shows him here what destruction is determined to bring about this end of sin. To make everyone see that no, you cannot sin because this is what brings in the end. It bites like an adder, as Solomon put it. And if you want to put a cross-reference down here of Proverbs 23, 31 to 32. Okay? Proverbs chapter 23, verses 31 to 32, if you want to cross-reference that. And that reads, "Do not gaze passionately at the redness of wine. When it sparkles in the cup, it goes down sweetly. But in the end, it bites like a serpent and stings like an adder." You know, you think about the law. You think about, go back to Genesis chapter 3, about the deception that Satan brings forth. You know, it brings forth, it's made to appear, oh, so desirable. Oh, so beautiful. Oh, you know, how can this possibly bring harm? But in following these things, it brings harm. When you violate the laws of Yahweh, when we follow that deception, it does. It brings harm. It might not do it all at once. It kind of sneaks up on you. Kind of like the first sip of wine somebody would have, you know, okay, well, that didn't do anything. It's sweet. Boy, that's nice. I think I'll have some more. And then I think I'll have some more. And slowly but surely, it creeps up on you, and before you know it, you don't have any self-control. You don't have any control over your emotions. You don't have any control over your thoughts, your actions. It's snuck up on you. And that's how sin is. You know, oh, this little sin, this isn't going to hurt. This isn't going to affect anything. But it does. Even though we don't detect it, even though we don't see it, it starts something it starts a process. It starts something into motion. And if it's not put to a stop, in the end, it will bite like an adder. It will sting. It will bite like an adder. And an adder, if I remember correctly, isn't that a poisonous snake? Yes. You get bit by a poisonous snake, what takes place? You're going to die. What takes place if you partake in sin? Same thing. Okay? So you can't sin because this is what it brings in the end. Now, continuing on there in Daniel chapter 12, verse 1, "And at that time Micaiah will stand up, the great prince who stands for the children of your people. You will find the same thing taking place in Revelation chapter 12. If you remember these things, will help you understand Revelation is merely showing what Daniel showed." So you find the same thing where at this time Micaiah will stand up, that great prince who stands for the children of your people. And you can cross-reference Revelation 12, 7 through 8. You know, because it was Daniel that was being quoted there. And if you remember these things, it will help you understand that Revelation is merely showing you what Daniel showed. But it explains it and brings it out to where you can put the two of them together and see a clearness in it. And it also covers not just Revelation 12, 7 through 8, but also Revelation 12, actually 6 through 16. That whole thing there. You know, if things are written here a little, there a little. You know, it's not one person, as Pastor has brought out, you know, not one prophet wrote everything about an entire subject. It's here a little, there a little. That's why we need a teacher, men. That's why we need a teacher. Micaiah will stand up, the great prince, who stands for the children of your people, and there will be a time. This time here that is spoken of is the same word that means 3.5 years. It's the same word here that means 3.5 years. That was given in Daniel, a time of trouble. So there is still a time of trouble yet right here. This time of trouble will be the very worst of all. It's going to be the very worst of all. We've seen a lot of trouble already in history, but nothing is going to be like this time of trouble. You know, and, you know, Yahshua put it, he put it as we'll get here in just a minute. But if you think about Isaiah 24, 1 through 6, we've referenced that already. You know, how the earth is made empty. The earth is made empty and it is made waste. You know, it wasn't created that way, remember, but it was the actions of mankind that made it empty, that made it waste, that perverted it from the perfect way that Yahweh created it into what we're seeing now. And, you know, I would guess if the apostles and the prophets saw the world that we live in right now, they wouldn't believe just how bad it has gotten. See, men, we've grown up in this environment. This is all we know. We don't know what it was like before. But this is the environment that we've grown up in. And so, this is, it is bad, and we can see that it's bad, and it's getting worse. But we can see here, if you remember Isaiah 24, verse 3, it shows that the land will be utterly emptied and utterly plundered. And that the earth will mourn and it will fade away. It's going to fade away. You can see it fading away. You can see the nutritional value in the food fading away. You can see the health of the people. You can see the physical health of the people in the world. You can see it fading away as well. If you have to go out in the world, if we have to go out for anything, and you just look at people look sickly. They don't look well at all. Hospitals are full of sick people. They're full of sick and dying people. But the earth is defiled under the inhabitants of it because the inhabitants have done something. Remember, the inhabitants of the earth, what did they do? They transgressed the laws, they changed the ordinances, and they broke the everlasting covenant. That's what they did. That's what brought about everything that we're seeing here. And because of this, the curse has devoured the earth, and they who dwell therein are desolate. Therefore, the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and there will be few men left. And those few people that are going to be left, men, are going to be those who are going to be doing, as Zechariah 14 showed, who are going to be going up from year to year, from one new moon to another, from one feast to another, from one Sabbath to another, to learn and to live by Yahweh's righteous laws. That's what's going to be left. And men, this is what we are training for. We are in a very peculiar, a very special spot in history right now. Because Yahweh is training, I don't care how old you are, I don't care how young you are, Yahweh is training each and every one of you for a very specific purpose, for a very specific job. And that job is going to be dealing with these 2 billion people. Make no mistake about it. Yahweh is not slack concerning his prophecies and concerning his promises. Not one of these things that Yahweh has prophesied is going to fail. Not one. Has any of them failed yet? They haven't. And they're not going to fail. Don't ever lose sight of that. Stay firmly grounded. Stay firmly grounded in the law and the prophets. Stay firmly grounded in the teachings that come forth from Yahweh's house, which are the teachings of the law and the prophets. But if you take a look here in Matthew chapter 24, verses 6 through 8, and verse 22, it says here, you will see of wars, you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. Well, we see that constantly, especially with the television, with the news. And see that you are not troubled, for these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation. We're seeing that with the nations rising up against one another. And kingdom against kingdom. And Pastor showed how it's talking about the religions are rising up against one another. And there will be famines, and there's going to be famines. We see famines throughout the world, don't we? What about pestilences? What about sicknesses? What about diseases? What about disease epidemics? Are we seeing that? We saw news articles and things about that. And what are those things being brought about by? The consumption of unclean food, the practicing of the practicing of acts that are prohibited in the law, in the Scripture. The acts prohibited in Leviticus 18, combined with the consumption of unclean foods, and there you see these abominable things that are going forth into the world. And they are jumping, they're affecting every man, woman, and child on the face of this earth. You're going to see these epidemics, disease epidemics, and earthquakes, which are these natural disasters, as they refer to them, in place after place. And these are but the first half of the sorrows of this tribulation. And notice the severity of what's written there in verse 22. And it says, and unless those days were shortened, there would no flesh be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. Okay? For the elect's sake, Yahweh is going to make sure that mankind learns a very valuable lesson. And Satan is going to learn this, the gods, the heavenly beings are going to learn this, all who see what is taking place now are going to learn, and they're going to know that there is no life without the laws of Yahweh. You can't have life without the laws of Yahweh. Ignoring the laws of Yahweh, committing iniquity, pushing them aside, brings about these clouds of calamity that Pastor's speaking of here in this chapter. Back to the book over here, it says, since there was a nation to that time, and at that time your people will be delivered. First off, he shows, look at the word delivered. Now highlight this word delivered. Highlight that and highlight the definition that follows behind it, okay? It says your people will be delivered. This word actually means rescue. It means save. Notice this other word, this next word here, serve. Your people will be delivered. Your people are going to be served. We're being called into the work of Yahweh to serve the 2 billion. Okay? Speedily. We don't have the time left. The clock is ticking, as the earlier sermons in this book. The clock is ticking. You know, we had we had 3.5 years. How much of that 3.5 years has ticked by already? Our salvation is nearer now than when we first believed. It's speedily coming. It's surely coming. The most common use of the word is to express the escaping from any kind of danger, such as an enemy. What is the ultimate enemy facing mankind right now? The enemy of death. Death is brought about by what? It's brought about by sin. So, to be delivered from this enemy of death comes forth from this work, comes forth from this house. The preaching and teaching of the message. Salvation, again, is once again being taught to this world. And he shows here, it says here, like in Isaiah 20, verse 6 here, it said, if you remember Josiah's reform. Now, highlight this here. Okay, we highlighted delivered, right? We highlighted that whole thing? Okay, praise Yahweh. Now, highlight Josiah's reform here, and it says, when he had the burning of the bones of the prophets. Do you remember that? Okay, highlight this next part here. We've got Josiah's reform highlighted. Now highlight, he had a time when they actually pulled up the bones of the false prophets and burned those things. This was for a reason, but that is another sermon. You have to get into the science of what would take place with those bones and showing the uncleanness of the grave. They did not want any of this coming to the people of Israel. So he told them to dig these bones up of the false prophets and burn them, to get them out of the land. That's in 2 Kings chapter 23, verse 16 through 18. Again, think about the defilement that comes with the microorganisms. How sin gets down to the microorganism level, and how these sins can actually reach into the heavens. And the earth is going to be cleansed with fire because to help get rid of these things, because there's only two things that cleanse, right? What's the first one? Water. And the second one is, why isn't the earth going to be cleansed with water? It was already cleansed with water. Yahweh made the promise that I will never again flood the earth. So that only leaves fire, right? Okay. Some of the people came to Yeshua, and they said, "These people are not false prophets in this grave here." Now, the same word for deliver used right here is what where they did not. Let me back this up. Let me back up here. Okay, some of the people came to Yeshua and said, "These people are not false prophets in this grave here." Now, the same word deliver is used right there where they did not burn the bones of the prophets who were true prophets. So it actually means to save or escape. So again, highlight this word deliver here. And highlight, so it actually means to save or escape. Okay, and that was, that was that first deliver. But this is this deliver here. It actually means to save or escape. So there you can kind of see the whole thing there. The bones of the true prophets here, Pastor shows, escaped the burning. That's what this word here means. It's not like you're going to be delivered from here to here. This place is not right, so we're going to deliver you over here to another place. It's not that. It's not being picked up and being moved. He said it's not that. It just means they are going to be safe. And safety comes through the obedience of following Yahweh's law. Remember, that's those blessings that come forth. Now, back to the word time here and the word trouble here. It is going to be the greatest ever. Now, highlight this next part. We need to highlight this next part here. The greatest part of this trib will be the last 3.5 years. That is what you are going to be delivered from. The greatest part of this trib will be the last 3.5 years, and that is what you're going to be delivered from. This is what we are going to be safe from. Remember, we're going to see 1,000 fall at one side and 10,000 to the other, but it won't come near us because we've made Yahweh our refuge, right? Because we've put our trust in Yahweh. That is why these things are not going to come near us. And that protection, again, I can't stress it enough, men, that protection comes from the obedience. Okay? In Revelation chapter 3, we see the 7th era of the house of Yahweh. This is prophesied. You can fully depend on it. These other prophecies have come to pass in detail, and this one will too. Up to and including the 2 witnesses who start this very work of the Philadelphia era that teaches what is true love. True love is without fornication. True love is without selfishness. True love is without adultery. Think about the laws. Think about the laws that he's showing here. And you could go out here, and if you wanted to, you could go out and you could put scriptures in there, showing, okay, where this is talking about this law here. This is talking about this one here. This selfishness is talking about this law. This adultery without adultery is talking about this other law. True love is without raping or killing children. Without abortions. And the great Kahan, he mentioned, it was either last week or the week before, about how many abortions and stuff had been committed so far this year, and we just got out of the first Roman month. This was just during the first Roman month. And without any of these things that are all right and acceptable in today's world. All of these things are acceptable. They're taught. They're taught in today's world. When the laws of Yahweh are rejected, when the laws of Yahweh are not taught, then these are the things that are being taught as acceptable. Okay? But true love, that's what true love is. True love is without those things. It was established, Yahweh said, by 2 witnesses to start with, and then later would be led from here by the one witness who goes forth, who goes on defending the word of Yahweh, down to salt and standing in the sun. That is actually given. The little details about the life of that last witness is given in Scripture, and is given in Scripture after Scripture after Scripture. Okay? If you take a look at Isaiah chapter 28. 28 verse 10, it says, "For precept must be upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line upon line, here a little, there a little." Okay? And so this is where, and this is how that this information concerning Yahweh's plan, concerning the 2 witnesses, concerning Yahweh's plan in general, it is all done precept upon precept. Look at the side note here. I know that's a long side note, but let's look at it and see here why these things are precept upon precept. That side note reads, the word of Yahweh, that is the law and the prophets, is written in parables, or here a little and there a little, as Isaiah states, so that the true believer, who is guided by Yahweh's Spirit Holy, will be able to rightly put together these words of truth and understand them so that they will guide him to salvation. Okay, so this is why. That's why they're written that way. On the other hand, the word of Yahweh, the law and the prophets, is written in parables, or here a little, there a little, as Isaiah states, so that the unbeliever will not be able to rightly put these words of truth and understand them, so that these words of truth become a snare and a testimony against the unbeliever's evil deeds. Okay, and then there's some cross-references there to that particular scripture, but this is in your book of Yahweh, that side note there for Isaiah 8:20, if you just kind of want to mark that, mark that down, and you can refer back to that. But some of the scriptures that come to mind when we're talking about the last witness, about the two witnesses, come in Isaiah, and you can cross-reference these if you want to. I mean, you probably have a whole list of them. And your margins might be completely filled up with them. But Isaiah 23:28 concerns the two witnesses. Isaiah chapter 44, verses 4 to 5. Isaiah 45, verse 4. Isaiah 46, 3 through 4. Isaiah 49, 1 through 8. See, Isaiah has a lot in there about the two witnesses. But so does Zechariah. Zechariah chapter 4 concerns the two witnesses as well. Zechariah chapter 6, verses 12 through 13. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, man, on the here a little and there a little. And the thing is, in order to understand about the two witnesses and who they are and what their job is and where they're from, and all of these things, you have to put these things one on top of the other. And the only way to do that, as we have mentioned before, is we have to have a teacher. We have to have a teacher that is inspired by Yahweh to be able to do those things. And we have to remember, you've got to remember that. Not anyone who comes to me, not anyone can just say, oh, I'm anointed to preach this salvation. Okay, what are your credentials? What are the credentials of the pastors down the street in the churches? Where are their credentials? What are the credentials of our pastor and overseer? The prophecies, exactly. Fulfilled prophecy proves all things. Where did Yahshua Messiah get his authority? From the prophecies. That's how we know who Yahshua was. Yahshua fulfilled the prophecies written about him, down to the very minute detail. Men, it's the same way with the last day's witness. Those prophecies were written, and those prophecies have been fulfilled. The same way with the establishment of the house of Yahweh in the last days, in a time period known as the last days. What identifies the last days? Well, Yahshua said when mankind has the capability to destroy all flesh off the face of the earth. Well, when did that come about? Surely it came about hundreds of thousands of years ago. Mankind didn't have the capability to destroy all flesh off the face of the earth until the invention of the atomic and nuclear weapons. That in and of itself identifies this last days time period. So, there's little things, here a little and there a little. And the believers, prophecy is written for the believers, man. This is why we're told, when we're discussing things concerning the house of Yahweh with individuals out in the world, if we ever do, we were always told to stick to Yahweh's name and the Sabbath. Right? Because if they can't accept Yahweh's name and if they can't accept the Sabbath, then they're not going to accept anything else. In fact, it was called casting your pearls before swine. Because these prophecies and the understanding, you think about that, the understanding of these prophecies is given to us. It's a gift to us. to see these things. It's truly a gift. You know, the world desires to see the things that we see. They desire to have the things that we have. You know, they desire to have their prayers heard. But they don't know how to have their prayers heard. First thing you have to do is depart from iniquity. You have to turn to keeping the laws of Yahweh in order to begin to have your prayers heard. But yet they teach lawlessness. They teach iniquity out in the churches. That's what they teach. They teach this iniquity. So their prayers are never going to be heard until they repent and stop doing that. And this is part of this great lesson that is going to be taught. Now, if we go back to the book here, to the messenger of the congregation of the house of Yahweh, on the top of page 52 here on the right-hand column, that is the Philadelphia time period. Write these things, says he who is holy, he who is true, he who has the key of David, he who opens and no man shuts, and shuts and no man opens. Okay, from right there, opens, he who opens, highlight that. He who opens and no man shuts, and shuts and no man opens. I know your works. I am well aware of all of your works. The work you are doing, each one is doing, each department, and each one who works there. Pastor was talking about this. He talked about the works being known all the way back in 2003 and before. But Yahweh knows, Pastor knows what each and every one of us is doing. So does Yahweh. And behold, now continue highlighting here. Continue highlighting. Behold, I have set before you this open door. That is prophesied and actually put in detail in Revelation 12. No man can shut this door. No man is going to stop Yahweh's work in these last days. It's not going to be done. It's not going to be stopped. This work is going to continue on, and it is going to usher in the kingdom of Yahweh. The house of Yahweh will not be destroyed in these last 3.5 years that are coming, or that we are now in, and that is going to be the greatest time of trouble ever on this earth. And if you want to cross-reference there, Matthew 16:18, you can cross-reference that. And if we continue on here, I know your works, and behold, I've set before you this open door that no man can shut it, for you have a little strength. This means that we are going to remain with this little strength until the end. And notice here, highlight this next part here where it says, and have kept my word, that is my laws. Highlight that. And have kept my word, that is my laws. And this word comes from the Hebrew word dabar, highlight that, and means law. Okay, highlight that. That is my laws. This word means law. Okay, the Hebrew word dabar, that's what it means. If there were 10 in front of it, Pastor says, it would be 10 commandments. There's no 10 in front of it, so it's 613 laws that you keep and uphold. From eating salt to getting sun, yes, every little law in Scripture will defend, and we defend and say it is healthy and right for the human body. Okay, highlight this next sentence here. My word, and have not denied my name. We have kept the name of Yahweh since this started, okay? We have not denied the name of Yahweh. And as far as keeping the laws, the laws concerning salt, that's positive law number 62. All offerings must be salted with salt, and you can find that there in Leviticus chapter 2, verse 13. If you want to cross-reference that, Leviticus chapter 2, verse 13. Okay, brethren, I do not know if you know if you all know the history of the house of Yahweh, but we have suffered hell, and I praise Yahweh for it. And he says there, I was so tickled one time when this man came to the house of Yahweh in order to take my life. And Elder David Yehuda was trying to hide me, and he was trying to tell the man I wasn't around. But that's actually something I think we'll probably get into next week. Okay? We've got just a few minutes left. There's just a few minutes left. And I think to close with this here, look at this highlighted, this box, this block that is at the bottom of this page here. Okay, remember the deception that has gone out in the world. Remember the clouds of calamity. Remember how the microorganisms and stuff are affected with this. And this was from an excerpt from a 3rd Roman month 2004 newsletter that pastor wrote here. And notice here, this is what it says. It says, I have seen all many changes in the last 60 years. The whores of Hollywood have become the #1 teacher of all the children for the last 50 years. Notice how strongly pastor puts that. The whores of Hollywood have become the #1 teacher of all the children for the last 50 years. There is very little objection to this, and there is no teaching to the contrary, showing the children the evil coming forth from this evil industry. Of course, he's speaking of the entertainment industry. As a result, there are now over 125 sexually transmitted diseases, any one of which can affect the human mind, and it does. It's been proven they do affect the human mind, causing confusion and desires, and it says sire desires or uncontrolled lust that take over the mind and the heart. And so you see this evil thing that is coming forth from this television puts the thoughts into the minds, and it actually influences people to practice the things that they see, to practice the things that they are taught from this industry. And they make it seem so glamorous, they make it seem so desirable, but yet in the end, it bites like an adder, just as Solomon said. They never show you the end result of that. But yet, men, we see the end result of it. We're seeing it now. It's a strange thing to most preachers and laymen, but in the great wisdom of the Holy Scriptures, the Creator Yahweh actually warned mankind that rebellion against His laws would lead to this sin-sick world which the preachers, the religious impostors, have created for all the people today. And how have they created? How have the preachers created this world today? Any idea? They teach that the laws have been done away with. They teach you don't have to do those things. You don't have to keep the laws of Yahweh. They push forth this iniquity. And so they are religious impostors. They've created this world. They've created these things. Just a few months ago, November 11/25/2003, Tom Brokaw reported on NBC World News that the latest statistics show that there were 40 million cases of AIDS. On 1/21/2004, Robert Bazell reported that there were now, get this, 60 million AIDS cases. That's 10 million cases per month and growing. It's snowballing. It's growing exponentially. It's going to continue to grow and continue to grow. And, these things aren't staying with the individuals. Remember, these things are getting out into the firmament. They're getting out into the environment. They're being spread from one person to another through the abominable practices by what mankind now views as normal. Okay? So we need to make sure, men, that we need to make sure, men, that we come out from among them and be separate, says Yahweh, and touch not the unclean. In other words, do not make ourselves with the characteristic traits of the gods, but pursue and seek first the kingdom of Yahweh and His righteousness, and put on that perfect righteous character that Yahweh wants in His family, so that we can qualify to be a part of this great solution and not part of this problem. So with that, man, we're going to stop here. The Great Khan will pick up next week on page 53. Yahweh be with you. Yahweh bless you. Yahweh protect you from the evils that are in this world.